Happy Easter Sunday, everybody. I hope you're all well and having a lovely day. It's a really nice day here today in Scotland. Sorry, my hair. It's a lovely day in the sun, and then out of the sun in the shade. It's a bit cold. I literally have my rug on, my electric rug. I was outside in the garden and I came back in and I'm actually freezing. So I just wanted to talk to you today about my first memories, very first memories from very young. And the memory that I think was my first memory was when I got, it must have been my second birthday, because I got a teddy bear. And my teddy bear was, I thought, the same size as me. And I thought, he's my new friend. And I got this teddy bear from my oldest sister and my oldest brother. They both got it for me, and because they were my godparents. I remember being in the kitchen. I remember exactly where I was, and I remember mum and dad and my brother and sister and maybe another brother or sister, I don't know, but I just remember those four for sure, and saying, "What are you going to call him?" And I said, "John." And they were like, I remember them saying things like Fluffy, and I really do. I don't know how I remember this because there's no photos of this. Nobody ever said this to me afterwards. And I remember it, and then I brought it up afterwards. So, no, John. This was John. So I have a teddy bear to this day called John, brown and white. And I thought he was ginormous because I suppose I was only two. So that's my first memory. And then I have a memory, maybe when I was about, I don't know, 2.5 or something like that, of my mum trying my sister's bike in the garden and going around the garden and falling off and everyone laughing. I remember that as well. And like, we were a very ordinary 1980s or 1970s, should I say, Dublin South Side family. Take from that what you must, but we were just a very kind of, I don't know what class we were. I remember saying to my mum, "Mum, are we middle class?" This is only in the last few years. And she kept saying, "What do you mean middle class?" And I said, "Well, are we working class or middle class?" She said, "Of course we're working class, we work." So anyway, I don't really know what the classes are, but my dad worked, my mum stayed at home, and we hadn't a lot of money, but we weren't very, very poor either. So that was my first thing. And then I also wanted to talk about my first friend. And I joke about this sometimes when it comes to my birthday and her birthday on Facebook. So my mum told me when I was born in the hospital beside this other little girl, and her mum was really, really nice, and she talked about her mum. I don't know why, but she would tell me this story about the woman beside her, and mum was in hospital for quite a while with me because of her high blood pressure and things like that. And so she told me about this woman and the little girl, and the little girl was called Mary. And then she told me that it was very sad that the mother, the woman, had a second little girl. I'm going to say a year later or something like that, and she died in childbirth. And I always just remember this story, and it was very sad. That was my, first introduction to, who I was born beside, or anything about kind of my birth. I know that in the hospital as well, mum was saying that there was a woman upstairs who had a heart problem with the exact same name as my mum. And the nurse came in and tried to give her a blood pressure or a heart tablet or something. I don't know, even though my mum did have blood pressure, but tried to give mum a certain tablet, and my mum wouldn't take it. And she got into trouble by the nurse and stuff like that. And it actually was for somebody upstairs. There's little, I suppose, bits and pieces that mum would tell me. But when I went to school, I was in the same school from all of primary and most of secondary, 4 years of secondary. I did 6 years in secondary school. And so for the first you do 3 years, low infants, high infants, first class, and then you go up to sixth, and then you go into first year. But it was all in the same school. And then for fifth and sixth year, I went to another school on the same grounds, really, run by the same convent. But in first year, so there were different schools on the ground. So I went to Our Lady of Loreto in Nutgrove. And then there was we called it the Blue School, which was Loreto on the Grange Road. Then there was the convent, which was the boarding school. Then you had Loreto Beaufort, which was kind of the private school. And I think you'd primary and secondary there. So we're all on the same grounds. And my grandmother, my mum's mum, went to the Blue School, which was Loreto Grange Road. My mum went to Loreto Grange Road, and her sisters and brothers up to a point, and then they obviously went to a boys' school. And then, but I remember, so in first year, secondary, in Loreto, Our Lady of Loreto in Churchtown or in Nutgrove, where I went, we'd all the Blue School girls coming to us. Most of them came to us. Some of them went to different schools, but a lot of them came to us. And they were all from around the same area that my mum had grown up. And there was one girl, and we were talking, and I don't know how it came out, but she talked about her mum was dead, and this girl's name was Mary, and she had a sister, and the sister had, I think, distress during birth, and due to that then had a disability and special needs after that. And when she told me this story, I remember just thinking, that sounds kind of familiar. But I remember going home to Mum and saying, Mum, I met, when I was telling her all the new girls in my class, and I was so excited and trying to tell her some that were belonged to where Mum was brought up and all this. And anyway, it worked out. This girl, Mary, was the girl who was born beside me in the hospital. And my mum had known her mum, and thought she was the most beautiful. She said she was a real lady. She was a beautiful woman. And then Mary's father came from the same area as my mum, so that's why I think Mary and her sister moved back to her dad's family, and I think that's kind of what happened. But there you go, I was in the same class as the girl who was born in the bed beside me. Out of all of Dublin, what are the chances? And then when I was about 2.5 to 3, my two sisters had friends in areas near me, like an area near me. We called it Holy Lands because it was an estate that was built on a monastery. I think it was on a monastery or whatever. People can correct me, but anyway, it was called Holy Lands. And so most of the people from there went to my school as well. So I became friends with all the people there. And but my sisters went to the same school as me, and they had friends. Both sisters had friends in different houses. And because of that, everyone was playing on the street, and I made friends with this little girl called, and when I say little, she was so petite and she was just beautiful, and her name was Janice, and I became friends with her. And so I always say they're my two first friends in the world, and we ended up, Janice went to primary school with me, and we went from low infants right up to 4th year. When I left the school, we were actually in the same classes. We were in the same year and everything else, but the same. So I grew up with her, Janice, and then so these are just, and then as I talked about yesterday, then I went to play school, and I met friends in play school, and I'm friends like some of these people. And then there was Amanda, and as I said, there was Susan, and there were a few of those, and some of these people that I'm talking about are still my friends on Facebook today. So it just goes to show you, and they were very special to me. Like they were special people to me in my life, in the sense that, these were big milestones in my life, like meeting new people and making connections and all of that. And then, so my first, so then I went to school, and I was dying to go to school. And as I'd said before, like I had read all my books before I went to school. And in Ireland, not in other, like in most other countries, people start school at 6. But we can start school at 4 or 5, and it depends on your birthday and all of that. So I was actually, it was September and I was 5. And then I'm just trying to think, I must have been 6 then in the November. So, and that's low infants. But then you'd some people very young who I remember, I think the youngest in our class was a girl called Edel. I think she was the youngest, and she was probably just gone 4, or maybe, I don't know. But anyway, so you have kind of that thing going on with the dates, and I'm not exactly sure. And I think you could choose, and my mum wanted me to be a little bit older going to school, because I had a sister who finished school at 16. I finished school at 18. So went to school, and oh my gosh, I was so excited to go to school. And my brother was on the same corridor, and he was in 3rd class. And I remember he was allowed to come in to my class, and I had Mrs. Clancy. So there were it was upstairs on this corridor, and you had Mrs. Clancy, Mrs. Fitzgerald, you had Mrs. Mackin, and Mrs. Foley. And Mrs. Foley was 3rd class. That was my brother's teacher. And then you had all the other teachers. And I remember kind of wanting Mrs. Fitzgerald because she'd long hair. And I thought if you'd long hair, you were younger. But I got Mrs. Clancy and she'd short hair. Oh, she was beautiful. They were all just so nice. And so there were low infants. So there was, I think the 3 classes were the low infant classes. So I went in on my first day, and the first person I sat beside was a girl called Lolita. She was so lovely, and she was just this gorgeous little thing, and she'd kind of blonde, curly, ringlety hair. And I remember sitting beside her, and I remember it so clearly. I remember asking her name, and she said Lolita. And I remember thinking that was an unusual name. And she asked me my name, and then we just kept smiling at each other, and we just sat there. And my brother then was able to come in for a while, and then he left. And and then I remember, I don't know if I knew that the girl Janice was the same one that I knew before, but anyway, I remember her. And I remember a girl called Barbara, and there were loads of them. I mean, it's too many. And there were boys, of course, as well. I mean, Darren, I was absolutely mad about Darren. And there was a guy called Richie who I think a few of the girls liked him. And but there were just so many. It was just so, like, it was like a big family. And we used to get in our school, we used to get on Wednesday and Friday, we got buns. They're like hot cross buns basically, and I loved them. And then we got free milk every day, and they were in bottles in those days. And then we got sandwiches. So we had corned beef sandwiches, which were hard. Like the butter was marmalade, and it was yellow, like really yellow and strong. And there was corned beef, jam, and then there was cheese. And I ate them all. I was always hungry. And so that's what we got. And then obviously, we finished early. But like when I think of it, like my mum used to walk me down to school, which was probably half an hour or 40 minutes. She'd walk me to school and then walk home, and then walk down and pick me up and walk home. She was as fit as a fiddle. And it was just a lovely, and then you'd walk through the estate, Holy Lands estate, on the way home, and all the mothers knew each other, and everyone was smiling. And it was just, now some people might look at this and say, yeah, right, whatever. But everyone knew everyone, and everyone's families were in this school. So you just knew everyone's brothers and sisters. And it was just like a community. And so that was the school I was in. And then I went into high infants, and I had Mrs. Broderick, and Mrs. Broderick used to always ask us to pray for something. And now I know it was so that she could get pregnant, and she did. And Mrs. Broderick was a gorgeous teacher. I absolutely adored her. And then we had, I remember Mrs. Broderick's as well. That was like high infants. I remember that my dad once, he brought my sandwiches in. He used to bring me to school in that time because I would be late sometimes, you know. I think I had a bit of anxiety. And he used to bring me down to school sometimes. I remember sitting there and a boy saying to me, his name was Francis. I think it was Francis. And he said to me, "Is that your granddad?" And I remember that really hurting me. And that had a huge effect on me because I remember thinking, that means my dad is old. And old meant you die. And I was afraid my dad would die. And I had this fear then that my dad was going to die. And I knew he was older than other fathers. I think dad was 49 when I was born. And my mum was 41 when I was born. And I just remember, can you imagine, like, that stuck with me all those years. I always remembered it. And then the teachers all loved my dad. They absolutely loved him. He'd come down and he was always joking and jolly and all of that. And then I was going to say something about low infants. There was something. Oh, yeah, I remember this girl, Barbara. She lived beside the school. She had a suitcase. And we had dolls and everything you could play. And I loved her suitcase. And it was this hard, you know, those hard square suitcases. I just thought, why is she the only one with the suitcase? Everyone should know. Everyone loved her suitcase. And I remember I used to use it as a doll and hold it in my arms, and she allowed me and play with it. And I loved her as well. I was like, oh, you know, you just love all your friends and you just love everybody. I loved everybody. And everyone was just, I remember in those days, and maybe I'm wrong, but I just remember everyone just being so happy and everyone being so gentle with each other. And we were just so young. We were babies. And, you know, even though we were 5 and 4 and 5 in low infants, we had actual books and we were learning Irish and we were reading Peter and Jane. It was, you know, the Ladybird books, it was Peter and Jane. And then I can't remember the Irish books that was like, I don't know, Kevin and Diarmuid and whoever. But we were reading in Irish and reading in English, and we were doing maths in low infants. And then we'd high infants and then first class. And first class I had Mrs. McKenna. And I adored Mrs. McKenna. I loved her as well. She was lovely and she had daughters, and she was just, she was gorgeous. Actually, she was probably only having her first child. I remember she was heavily pregnant in first class when I had her, and she knit. She used to knit, and so did actually the other teacher in Mrs. Bird. They used to knit during class, and she was amazing. And we were preparing for our first Holy Communion. So that was a really exciting year. And our first Holy Communion was just wonderful. You know, white dresses. We felt like, you know, brides. It was just so special. And we used to have the May procession as well. And the May procession was, well, that would have been actually genuine. It was either that year or the year after. But I made my communion, I think, on the 10th of May, 1980. And I loved it. And I remember going to sleep. I was so excited and going to sleep and waking up at 10 o'clock and getting such a fright and saying, oh my God, we're late for the church. And it was 10 o'clock at night. And I loved my dress. I got my dress in Rathfarnham. My cousin, she got her dress in the same shop the same day. And I wasn't allowed to get all the stuff everyone else was getting, like umbrellas and gloves and everything. My mum was like, no. So I had it, and I wanted a long dress. I got a short dress, that, you know, knee length or whatever, and my ankle socks. But my favourite thing of my whole communion were my frilly knickers, and everyone had to see my frilly knickers. I had to show them. Oh my gosh, like that was my highlight of my Holy Communion. And everyone made loads of money, and I made £21. And I mean, people were making like £100, and I made £21 because I was getting gifts of like a cross or a little statue, and my friends were getting things like, I don't know, I'm going to say like £10 or £20. I was getting like £1 and £5. So I got £21, and I remember I saved that. That was when my mum opened a bank account for me, and that money went into the bank account, and that came out when we went on my first ever abroad holiday, which was the ferry over to France, and my £21 came with me. And then I was saving, I think I saved another something like £7, so I had 28, and I had it in my little handbag. I had a little handbag and a little purse. And the little purse was from my Auntie Nancy, who had gone to, it was one of those, those, oh, what were they called? They were the clowns. I can't remember, the clowns with the tears, the black and white. Anyway, she got me a purse in the Isle of Man, and it went into my lovely little handbag. And I went to the toilet on the ferry and left my handbag in the toilet, and my dad was outside and said, "Where's your handbag?" And I left it in the toilet, went back in, and it was gone. And nobody had even left it was gone. And eventually the bag and the purse was found, and no money in it, but £28. Can you imagine? Oh, I was distraught. My dad said, "Don't worry, I'll give you the money. So if you need anything, I'll get it." So, I tried to buy everything and anything and say to him, "Oh, I still have money, I still have money." And he kept saying, "You've well used up your money now." But yeah, so I got £21 for my communion, and that was amazing. And I remember sitting beside twins called Peter and Michael. They were to my left. I remember that, and I was thrilled. I was very boy obsessed very early. I wanted to marry Darren, this guy Darren, and I just love. And there were a few of us now that were a bit like that. There was a bit of competition going on with the girls and the boys, and it's just funny when you think of it. I remember in High Infants, we were to bring in our teddy bears, and I brought in my teddy bear called Honey, which was my favourite teddy bear. And that teddy bear actually disappeared. My brother Paul, I think, threw it out the window of the bathroom. But Honey, I brought Honey, and I remember sitting beside Darren, and he told me he'd been in America and he wanted to be a pilot. And I thought, because I was only like 6, I thought he was a pilot. And he went to New York, and he went to the Twin Towers, and he was going to be a pilot and live there. And I asked him, could I live with him, and would he marry me? And I was just obsessed with him. He wasn't obsessed with me. He used to try and get away from me all the time. And I remember a teacher telling me in Low Infants, Mrs. Clancy had to ask me to keep away from him because I kept trying to kiss him. Me and another girl kept trying to kiss his cheeks, like we were trying to kiss him. And so it was an amazing school. Then we went on to second class. Now all the boys had to go to their school. They had to go to either St. Mary's in Rathfarnham, or they had to go to the Good Shepherd in Churchtown. So that's where they went to. And it was very sad altogether that they'd left. And now we were an all girls school. And second class, I had Sister Rosalie. Or Sister Rosaline or Sister Rosalie, but I absolutely loved her as well. She was a tough nut. Oh God, she was tough. But I won that year. I won a kind of a plastic gold cup for best student, and she was just lovely. And she told me quite a few things about myself that I still think about. She told me that I was not to be overly perfect, because I hated getting colouring outside the lines. And she told me that I was very stubborn, and she said I have to listen. I think I know everything, because I couldn't have her tell me what to do. And it was in second class that I realised that the fear I had around my dad dying. every time we said the Our Father, the Lord's Prayer at the beginning of the school day, I used to ask could I go to the toilet, and I used to go to the toilet and cry. And one day I got stuck, I couldn't get out of the toilet, and Mr. Hill, who used to, he was the caretaker, was banging and banging, and he opened the door, and I was in an awful state. And Sister Rosalie said to me, how come you go to the toilet every morning when we start saying the prayers? And I said, because every time we say the prayers, I think of my dad, and I think he's going to die. And she said, why would you think that? And I said, I don't know. And, you know, I just had this terrible fear of my dad dying. I had separation anxiety. I hated being away from my mum and dad. Being in school, I loved school, but I just wanted to be with my mum and dad. I did have separation anxiety. Because of that, like I remember in I think it was high infants as well, my mum was called in to ask, why do I have a kidney infection? Why does she go to the toilet all the time? I just went to the toilet all the time. And I think that was anxiety. And I wasn't just trying to disappear into the toilet, like I literally went to the toilet all the time. And that, I think, was, I had all this anxiety, but on the outside, you wouldn't know it. You just wouldn't have known it. And I always say I was a happy-go-lucky kid. I was always giggling in school. I mean, school's the best place to giggle because you're not allowed to laugh and talk. And when you do, you get the best laughs. I always got the best laughs in school and in church. And because you giggle. And I really did love that. I loved my friends. I loved everything. So then I went into third class, Mrs. Murphy. And I remember once she hit me on the back and winded me because she thought I was talking, which I always was. But this one particular time, it actually wasn't me. I remember she slammed me in the back. And that was when you weren't allowed at that stage hit students. And I remember going home telling my mum, and she said, well, you must have deserved it. So that was kind of the way I was brought up. You know, the teachers were always right. Mrs. Murphy always talked about wine. I remember very distinctly talking about, she went to France. So we came back. We went into school, obviously, in September. And before that, you always went in the June for a day, I think, to be introduced. And then the September you started school. And I remember she told us that she was going to France, say in the June before. She was going to go to France on her holidays. And then she went to France and she said, and the wine. And I always remember this. She went like this and talked about the wine. And it was delicious. And I went home and told Mum. And she went mad. She said, that's disgraceful. Because I was saying, I can't wait to taste wine. I cannot wait. And I knew you had to be older to taste alcohol, but I was dying to taste wine. I mean, literally, that was the beginning of my obsession to taste wine. And I would have been 8 at this stage, going on 9. And yeah, and I remember just thinking this woman was so sophisticated. And my parents never drank. So then I thought, oh God, they're so boring. I wish my parents drank wine. And I was dying to taste wine. So Mrs. Murphy was a lovely woman. I remember she had a daughter probably a little older than us. And she went to the private school, Beaufort, which I later went to for 5th and 6th year. And yeah, I always just remember she had this daughter, and I used to think, oh, teachers to me were on another level. They were above me. They were, they were very special. They were posh. They were rich. They were, the way you just kind of thought they were on this. They were perfect, and their families were perfect. And then I went from her to 4th class, Mrs. O'Brien. Oh my God, she was amazing. And she taught us so. I remember the first day that we went to her in the June, she put up this word called responsibility on the board, and she said that's what we were going to be doing in 4th class. We were going to be learning about responsibility. She taught me how to she taught me about believe it or not, I still have the stuff in a folder about interviews for jobs, how to go for interviews for jobs. Fourth class, I was 10, going in for interviews. She taught us about being a secretary and filing systems. Her stuff has stuck with me from that age. I always remember her saying, if you were hit by a bus, we need to find the information. If you were hit by, always remember, and I've always talked about this to this day. That's how I talk about it. So she was amazing, and you know, she used to say, at this stage now, we were introduced to, I think from third class, which was the year before, we were introduced to uniforms. So we had this uniform. We had a lovely green skirt and green socks, bottle green and bottle green jumper, and this mint coloured blouse. And she said, in order to have she'd check people's uniforms, and she'd say, if you don't know how to iron and you haven't got an iron, you put it under the mattress the night before. Always remember saying that. You put things under the mattress the night before, and then it'll be straight, and make sure, yeah. I was Mrs. O'Brien, gorgeous woman, very kind. And I sat beside Donna, and me and Donna we laughed the whole way through fourth class. Honest to God, we literally laughed the whole way through fourth class. And I sat beside Emma as well for some of it as well. And we'd such a laugh. I loved school. So then fifth class, Miss Perryman. And Miss Perryman was a very kind, good woman, but she had a temper. And I met her later in life and thanked her for teaching me the things she taught me. And she said she regretted the way she treated us. And I remember talking on Facebook with old school friends, and they said, like, there were experiences they had with her. I mean, she'd throw chairs across the room. She was the first. I was the first. Me and Anya were the first ever in our class to get detention. And she gave us detention I think we finished school at, we'll say 3, and I'd stay till 3:15, or maybe we finished at 3:15 and we'd stay till half. And we didn't tell our parents because we would be murdered if we told them. But she was a little bit eccentric, and she'd play classical music, and we'd look out at the birds, and she taught me about birds, like the beauty of the birds, and we learned all about different birds. And I loved that she gave me such a love for, the bird, like different types of birds. So she, I became a kind of bird watcher then. And the nutcracker, and she'd say, listen to the music, look at nature. She gave me a really good foundation for music and nature. And she'd bring us on nature walks and name all the different things. And our school was in the most beautiful grounds. There was a pond, there were swans, ducks. It was stunning. And it's all gone now, and it's just apartments. Very sad. And I loved her very much. And, she could be pretty difficult, but I did love her. And I always had this thing that I could see through them. It was actually in her class that I remember I realised I needed glasses. It was in her class that I started getting migraines and going blind and vomiting. And that was because my dad had started to get sick. And I was obviously stressed. This is when Dad was starting to go into hospital. And yeah, I think that's when I started really kind of suffering internally myself, and something shifting inside me, getting a little bit, sad and things like that. And then sixth class was making our confirmation, and that was Mrs. O'Hara. Was it Mrs. O'Hara? No, Mrs. Oh God, I loved her. Absolutely adored her. She was beautiful, but she used to get sick a lot with she used to get like pleurisy and stuff like that. And she was absolutely amazing. I absolutely adored her. And I think it's long enough. I've talked long enough, but I will talk about my confirmation and how I chose my confirmation name and the people I sat with and the people I hung around with in school. But that's just a little bit of a background into my schooling from my primary and how much I loved it. And I'll go into a little bit more detail in the next video. So hope you're all well. Sending you lots of love. Take care. Bye.